The transformation in the ballroom was instantaneous and brutal. In a matter of seconds, Isabella Rodriguez went from being the ignored domestic worker to being the most important person in the room. The change in facial expressions was cinematic: shock, disbelief, envy, and in many cases, profound shame. Madison Whitmore Carson, who minutes before had controlled the narrative with calculated cruelty, now looked like a lost child. Her fingers trembled as she obsessively scrolled through Google search results, as if she could find some evidence that it was all a lie. Rodriguez Real Estate, founded in 2003, largest Latina commercial real estate owner in California. She read aloud, her voice losing all its previous arrogance. Stephanie was reading another article. Forbes, 40 under 40. Wait, this is about her son, Carlos Rodriguez, CEO of CR Construction, following in the business footsteps of his mother, Isabella Rodriguez, real estate mogul. The humiliation was delicious and terrible at the same time. People who had spent the entire evening showing off their achievements now realized they were in the presence of someone who surpassed them in every financial aspect, and who had achieved this, starting literally from nothing. Ashley Parker Smith, who had boasted about her 5 resorts, discovered that Isabella owned more real estate properties in LA alone than the entire Parker Smith chain had on the West Coast. Tiffany Goldman Phillips, specialist in millionaire divorces, mentally calculated that Isabella alone was worth more than all her clients combined from the last 5 years. Courtney Blackwell Montgomery, who had raised $2 million at her most exclusive charity ball, realized that Isabella could organize 10 similar events just with the money she had in her personal checking account. But the real change came when people started getting up from their tables and walking toward Isabella. The same ballroom that had witnessed her humiliation 50 years before now witnessed a pathetic social migration. Everyone wanting to be near the new, most powerful person in the room. "Isabella," called James Morrison, a former classmate who had never spoken a word to her in school. "How incredible. I always knew you were special. Remember when we sat together in math class?" Isabella smiled politely. "No, James, you never sat with me. Actually, you once changed seats when the teacher tried to pair us as project partners." The embarrassment on James's face was visible, but he kept trying. "Ah, what a fantastic memory you have. Listen, I'm on the board of some interesting investments. Maybe we could have lunch next week?" The line of people wanting to reconnect with Isabella grew, each one with a more pathetic excuse than the last. "Isabella, I always admired your determination. You were always the smartest in the class. What an inspiration you are to all of us. It would be an honor if you met my investment fund." Isabella watched this hypocritical social dance with a mixture of amusement and disgust. 50 years too late, these people finally wanted her friendship, but only because she had become richer than them. Madison, still seated at her table, watched the exodus of people toward Isabella with growing horror. For the first time in her privileged life, she was being abandoned by the very social circle she had controlled for decades. It was then that Isabella did something no one expected. She raised her hand, asking for silence, and walked slowly to Madison's table. The entire ballroom followed her movements, as if she were a queen approaching a fallen subject. Isabella stopped directly in front of Madison, and, for a long moment, the two women stared at each other. 50 years of history, pain, humiliation, and now vindication were condensed in that look. "Madison," Isabella said, her voice low but clear enough for the entire ballroom to hear, "you have something to say to me." Madison opened and closed her mouth several times, like a fish out of water. Her elite friends, Stephanie, Tiffany, Ashley, Courtney, all avoided looking directly at her, as if her fall were contagious. I always knew you were special," Madison finally managed to whisper, her voice trembling. Isabella tilted her head slightly. "Interesting, because I remember very clearly you calling me a cleaning lady less than an hour ago, and domestic worker, and suggesting that I didn't belong in this place." The silence in the ballroom was so complete you could hear the air conditioning system running. "Actually," Isabella continued, her voice gaining strength, "I remember you throwing champagne on my dress 50 years ago, at the country club party. I remember you dumping my purse on the floor. I remember you making me leave through the back door as if I were trash." Tears began to form in Madison's eyes. Not tears of genuine remorse, but tears of panic from someone who realizes their world has just collapsed. "Isabella, please," she began. "Please what?" Isabella interrupted. Please forgive 50 years of systematic cruelty. Please pretend that you didn't spend this entire evening trying to humiliate me again, in front of 200 people?" Isabella paused, looking around the ballroom, and then said the words that would resonate forever in Madison's mind. "You taught me a valuable lesson 50 years ago, Madison. You taught me that I should never depend on your approval to be happy. You taught me that true power isn't displayed. It's built in silence. You taught me that the best revenge isn't lowering myself to your level. It's rising so high that you become irrelevant." Madison tried to stand up, perhaps to approach Isabella, perhaps to flee, but her legs wouldn't obey. She remained seated, small and diminished, while Isabella continued. "You spent 50 years spending your parents' money, your husband's money, your inheritance money. I spent 50 years building my own fortune, brick by brick, property by property, smart decision by smart decision." Isabella leaned slightly toward Madison. "And you know what the difference between us is, Madison? You were born rich and will die rich. I was born poor and became rich. You inherited your status. I built mine. You need to display your wealth to feel important. I can afford to be humble because my wealth speaks for itself." The final blow came when Isabella smiled, not a cruel or vindictive smile, but a smile of genuine pity. "Madison, you're right about one thing you said tonight. I was always special. The difference is that now I know it, and I don't need your approval, or anyone else's approval in this room, to validate who I am." Isabella turned to leave, but stopped and looked one last time at Madison. "Oh, and Madison, thank you. Without your cruelty, I might never have found the motivation to become who I became. In a way, you were the best teacher I ever had." Opening scene. In a Beverly Hills mansion, a 72-year-old woman holds a golden invitation with trembling hands. Her name is written in elegant letters, Isabella Rodriguez. But what her former Beverly Hills high classmates don't know is that the poor girl they humiliated for years now controls a $100 million empire and is about to appear at the 50-year class reunion. The Los Angeles morning sun filters through the crystal windows of the Bel Air mansion, creating golden reflections on the Italian marble floor. Isabella Rodriguez, at 72, walks barefoot through the silent corridors of her $12 million home, a property she bought in cash 5 years ago, without anyone knowing her true identity. Her hands, still marked by years of hard work, tremble slightly as she holds the envelope that arrived in the morning mail. Expensive paper, satin texture, with the Beverly Hills High School crest in golden relief. Inside, an elegant invitation, 50-year reunion, Beverly Hills High School, class of 1974, Beverly Hills Hotel, Crystal Ballroom. Isabella sits in an Italian leather armchair that costs more than many people earn in a year. But at this moment, she doesn't think about the luxury surrounding her. Her mind travels 5 decades back in time, to the cold corridors of that school where she was treated as a second-class citizen. She remembers the smell of wax on the floor, the sound of rich girls' high heels echoing through the hallways, the cruel laughter that followed her like shadows. Beverly Hills High School, where she studied from 1970 to 1974, was the stage for the worst humiliations of her youth. Isabella Rodriguez wasn't just different from the other students. She was the complete opposite of everything that school represented. Daughter of Jose Rodriguez, a gardener who tended to Beverly Hills mansions, and Maria Rodriguez, a seamstress who worked at home doing alterations for the ladies of the area. They had immigrated from Guadalajara, Mexico in 1965, carrying only dreams and an unwavering determination to give their children a better life. Back then, Isabella didn't live in Bel Air. Her family lived in a small 2-bedroom house in Boyle Heights on the east side of LA, where the smell of tortillas and the sound of Spanish filled the narrow streets. Every day, she took 3 different buses to get to the rich kids' school, a 2-hour journey that started at 5 in the morning. While her classmates arrived in Porsche 911s, BMW convertibles, and Mercedes-Benzes that their parents bought as 16th birthday gifts, Isabella got off the city bus at the corner of Sunset Boulevard and Beverly Drive, always 10 minutes late for first period. Her only bag was plastic, bought at a discount department store. Her uniforms were second-hand, slightly faded, with small patches that her mother made with such care. She didn't have Nike or Adidas sneakers. She wore simple black shoes that squeaked when she walked through the school's marble corridors. Madison Whitmore was the undisputed leader of the elite group. Daughter of Richard Whitmore, owner of one of LA's largest construction companies. She had been born in a literal golden cradle. Her first baby photos were taken in a real gold-plated crib. At 18, Madison already had her own unlimited credit card, a closet bigger than Isabella's house, and an arrogance that seemed to have been carefully cultivated since birth. It was Madison who started the cruel chants, Izzy the Dizzy, Spanish Maid, Bus Girl. It was she who organized the pranks that left Isabella in tears in the bathroom. It was she who made sure to remind her every day that she didn't belong in that world. Now, 5 decades later, Isabella holds the invitation and smiles ironically. If they only knew. If Madison Whitmore knew that the domestic worker she had humiliated so much now possessed wealth that made the Whitmore fortune look like pocket change. Isabella gets up from the armchair and walks to her panoramic window, which offers a 270-degree view of Los Angeles. She can see from downtown LA to the Pacific Ocean, from Hollywood Hills to Long Beach. This view costs $50,000 a month, more than many families earn in an entire year. But Isabella didn't buy this house for the view. She bought it because it's exactly on the route she took by bus to school every day. Every morning when she wakes up, she can see the path she traveled as a poor, dreamy girl. It's her particular way of never forgetting where she came from. Her first reaction upon seeing the invitation was to throw it in the trash. After all, why reopen wounds that took decades to heal? Why give these people the satisfaction of seeing her again? But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the desire to finally close this chapter of her life. Or maybe, just maybe, it was time for these people to learn a lesson that was 50 years overdue. What Isabella doesn't imagine is that her former classmates are planning something much worse for this reunion. Beverly Hills, September 1974. Isabella Rodriguez walks nervously through the golden gates of Beverly Hills High School in her senior year. At 18, she is a beautiful young woman, with delicate features inherited from her mother and the iron determination of her father. But none of that matters when you're the only Latina in a school where tuition costs more than many families earn in a year. The school, built in neoclassical style with white marble columns, looks more like a museum than a place of learning. The gardens are perfectly maintained by a team that includes Isabella's father, an irony that doesn't go unnoticed by anyone. While Jose Rodriguez trims the rose bushes that beautify the campus, his daughter faces daily the children of the bosses who hire him. Isabella works part-time at Sunset Diner, a modest diner on Sunset Boulevard, frequented mainly by construction workers and truck drivers. 3 afternoons a week, from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. She serves hamburgers, cleans tables, and washes dishes to help the family pay the bills. Her hands constantly smell of detergent and grease, something Madison Whitmore never misses an opportunity to comment on. Wow, Isabella, what's that new perfume? Chanel number. Grease, Madison shouts in the middle of the main courtyard, drawing laughter from her court of admirers. She wears an original Halston, hair perfectly styled by a professional every morning, nails done weekly at the most expensive salon on Rodeo Drive. Madison's group consists of 5 girls who represent the young elite of Los Angeles. There's Stephanie Morrison, daughter of cinema mogul Morrison Entertainment, who has already appeared on magazine covers as debutante of the year. Tiffany Goldman, whose father is one of Hollywood's biggest divorce lawyers, specializing in multi-million-dollar celebrity separations. Ashley Parker Smith, heiress to a hotel chain that spans the West Coast. And finally, Courtney Blackwell, daughter of a film producer who has already won 2 Oscars. Together, they form an impenetrable wall of privilege and cruelty. Their uniforms are from Saks Fifth Avenue, customized by private tailors. Their jewelry consists of family heirlooms or expensive gifts from parents. Their cars are always in the best school parking spots, gleaming and new. Isabella, on the other hand, wears second-hand uniforms bought at Goodwill. Her mother, Maria, works nights making adjustments so they fit perfectly, adding small hand-embroidered details to disguise stains or wear. She has no jewelry, only a small silver cross that belonged to her grandmother. And instead of a car, she gets off bus number 27 every day at 7:45 a.m., always 10 minutes late for first period. The torture began the moment she stepped on campus. "Look, everyone, the cleaning lady has arrived," Madison would shout, making everyone turn to watch Isabella getting off the bus. The laughter echoed through the perfectly manicured gardens, creating a cruel echo. that seemed to never end. During classes, Isabella always sat in the back row, trying to be invisible. But Madison made sure she was never forgotten. During physical education classes, when the girls changed clothes in the locker room, Madison made comments about Isabella's simple underwear, comparing them to her French silk sets. "Where do you buy these pieces? In the children's section at Kmart," she would ask loudly, making the other girls laugh. Isabella would change quickly in a corner, trying to hide the tears that insisted on appearing. In the cafeteria, the humiliation continued. While Madison and her friends ate organic salads brought from expensive restaurants or prepared by their private housekeepers, Isabella ate peanut butter sandwiches that her mother prepared with cheap bread from the local market. "Seriously, Isabella, can't you buy real food?" Stephanie would ask, sitting purposely at the next table just to provoke. "Or does your family only have money for pet food?" The jokes were relentless and creative. They invented new nicknames every week. Burrito Girl, Maid Maria, Taco Tuesday, always in reference to her Mexican origins. Isabella tried to ignore them, but the words accumulated in her soul like wounds that never had time to heal. The worst was when they imitated her parents' accent. Maria and Jose spoke English with a strong Mexican accent, something Madison and her friends reproduced with cruel exaggeration during breaks. "Ay, Dios mío, where is my daughter?" they would mock, doubling over with laughter. Isabella never told her parents about the humiliations. Jose worked 16 hours a day tending gardens around the city, returning home with an aching back and dry hands. Maria spent nights sewing, her fingers full of small needle cuts, to earn a few extra dollars. How could she add more weight to the shoulders of people who already carried so much? So she swallowed her tears, held her head high, and continued walking through the marble corridors, pretending the words didn't hurt her. But at night, in her small room that she shared with 2 younger sisters, Isabella cried into her pillow, promising herself that one day those people would pay for every tear they made her shed. But there was something about Isabella that Madison never discovered, and that would change everything 50 years later. If you've ever been bullied at school, leave a like on this video and tell us something that marked you. And subscribe to the channel because this story will show you that revenge sometimes comes when we least expect it. The humiliations at Beverly Hills High shaped every decision Isabella made for the next 30 years of her life. In May 1974, she graduated as one of the top 3 students in the class, a fact that Madison and her friends conveniently ignored during the graduation ceremony. While they posed for photos with their wealthy families in designer dresses, Isabella wore a dress her mother had sewn by hand, working nights to create something worthy of the occasion. The graduation party was at the Beverly Hills Country Club, in a mansion that cost $200,000 to rent for one night, more than the Rodriguez family earned in 5 years. Isabella wasn't invited to the main party. Instead, there was an alternative celebration in the school gymnasium, intended for the other students, code for the few students who didn't belong to the local elite. 2 years after graduation, at 20, Isabella met Miguel Santos at a Sunday Mass at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Boyle Heights. Miguel was 23 and worked as a mechanic at Santos Auto Repair, a small shop inherited from his father in the heart of East LA. He had calloused hands, a gentle smile, and an honesty that Isabella had never found in Beverly Hills. Miguel didn't care that Isabella had no money or social status. He saw in her an intelligent, hard-working, and beautiful woman with dreams bigger than her circumstances. They dated for 2 years, meeting on weekends in public parks, cheap movie theaters, and modest Mexican restaurants where a complete meal cost $3. In June 1976, they married in a simple ceremony at the same church where they met. Isabella wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered and modernized. Miguel wore the only suit he owned, borrowed from his older brother. The party was in the backyard of Isabella's parents' house, with mariachi music played by family friends, homemade food prepared by the women of the community, and genuine joy that no amount of money in the world could buy. They moved to a small 2-bedroom house in Boyle Heights, 6 blocks from Isabella's parents' house. The house cost $15,000, an amount they paid in installments of $150 per month for 10 years. The bathroom had only a small shower. The kitchen barely fit 2 people, and the roof leaked when it rained hard. But it was theirs. In 1978, Sophia was born, their first daughter. Isabella was working as a housekeeper in 3 different houses in Beverly Hills when she went into labor. She cleaned marble bathrooms and vacuumed Persian rugs until the day before giving birth, because they couldn't afford to lose a day of work. 2 years later came Carlos, their second child. Miguel worked 12 hours a day at the shop, 6 days a week, to support the family. Isabella continued cleaning houses, but now with 2 small babies, she could only work when Miguel came home to take care of the children. Life's irony meant that Isabella worked cleaning the same houses where her former schoolmates held their parties and celebrations. She cleaned the bathrooms where Madison Whitmore got ready for charity balls. She vacuumed the carpets where Stephanie Morrison walked in her $1,000 shoes. She polished the mirrors where Tiffany Goldman practiced speeches for social events. They never recognized her. To the wealthy ladies of Beverly Hills, all the Latina women who cleaned their houses were invisible and interchangeable. Isabella was just the Mexican who comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, even though she had studied at the same school as her employers. During these cleanings, Isabella observed everything in silence. She saw how these women spent money. $500 on a single purse, $200 on a dress worn only once, $3,000 on a birthday party for a 5-year-old child. She memorized the names of companies they mentioned on the phone, the investments their husbands made, the properties they bought and sold. Isabella never spoke a word about the past she shared with these women. She just cleaned, observed, and learned. Every insult she had suffered in high school transformed into fuel for a silent determination that grew each day. At night, after Miguel and the children slept, Isabella sat at the kitchen table with accounting books borrowed from the public library. She studied investments, real estate market, business administration. Her real education hadn't happened at Beverly Hills High. It was happening now, in her modest home's kitchen, under the dim light of a 60-watt bulb. When Carlos turned 5 in 1985, Isabella made a discovery that would change everything. One of her employers, Mrs. Henderson, was selling a small apartment building in East LA for $85,000. The building was in poor condition, but Isabella calculated that with basic renovations, it could generate a monthly income of $2,400. She didn't have the $85,000, not even the $17,000 for the down payment. But Isabella Rodriguez had learned one important thing: cleaning the houses of the rich. They didn't get rich by being careful. They got rich by being brave. What they didn't know is that Isabella was watching everything and learning the most intimate secrets of their families. Beverly Hills Country Club, June 15, 1975. The one-year post-graduation party for the class of 1974 was being held in the main ballroom of Los Angeles' most exclusive club. Isabella Rodriguez should never have been there, but an administrative error included her name on the guest list, along with an elegant invitation sent to her home in Boyle Heights. Isabella hesitated for weeks before deciding to go. Miguel tried to dissuade her. Why do you want to mix with these people who treated you so badly? But something inside her needed to see. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was the naive hope that they had changed after a year away from school. She spent 2 weeks' salary at a Santa Monica thrift store, looking for a dress suitable for the occasion. She finally found a navy blue dress, simple but elegant cut, that had belonged to some socialite who donated it after wearing it only once. It cost $45, money her family couldn't spend, but that Isabella considered an investment in her dignity. Maria, her mother, worked 3 nights adjusting the dress perfectly to Isabella's body. She added small hand-embroidered details to the collar and cuffs, transforming a second-hand piece into something unique and special. To complete the look, Isabella borrowed a small purse from her cousin and wore the only high heels she owned, black and simple, but well-maintained. On the night of the party, Isabella took 2 buses to get to Beverly Hills. She got off at the corner of Wilshire and Beverly Drive and walked 6 blocks to the club, her hands sweating inside borrowed gloves. The Beverly Hills Country Club rose before her like a palace, with its illuminated columns, perfectly manicured gardens, and a row of Rolls-Royces, Jaguars, and Mercedes parked at the entrance. The doorman, a black man in an impeccable uniform, looked Isabella up and down before checking her name on the list. "Isabella Rodriguez," she said with a firm voice, trying to hide her nervousness. He found the name, frowned slightly, clearly surprised to see her there, but let her in. The main ballroom was a work of art in marble and gold. Crystal chandeliers hung from the hand-painted ceiling. Round tables covered with Belgian linen tablecloths were elegantly arranged, and a small string ensemble played classical music on a stage decorated with exotic flowers that cost more than Isabella earned in a month. Isabella entered hesitantly, immediately conscious that her dress, even though beautiful, didn't belong in that environment. The other women wore creations by famous designers: Halston, Calvin Klein, Oscar de la Renta. Their jewelry captured the light from the chandeliers, creating small rainbows that danced across the walls. For a few minutes, Isabella managed to blend in discreetly. She took a champagne flute from a tray offered by a waiter and positioned herself near the window, observing her former classmates who hadn't changed at all in terms of arrogance and ostentation. Madison Whitmore was at the center of the ballroom, as always. She wore a red Valentino dress that cost more than the Rodriguez family earned in 6 months. Her hair was pulled back in an elaborate chignon, done by a professional, and she wore a pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother, a $50,000 gift for her 19th birthday. For almost an hour, Isabella managed to remain invisible. She heard conversations about trips to Europe, new cars, apartments in Paris, and art investments. It was like watching a movie about a world she could never fully understand. But then the inevitable happened. Stephanie Morrison saw her first. "Everyone, look who's here!" she shouted loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. "It's Isabella, our favorite little cleaning lady." The ballroom didn't stop completely, but a circle of silence formed around Isabella. Madison turned, her eyes widened in surprise, and a cruel smile spread across her perfectly made-up face. "I can't believe you had the nerve to show up here," Madison said, walking toward Isabella with her friends forming a small court behind her. "And look, you even dressed up like rich people. Very cute." The laughter started quietly but grew louder. Tiffany Goldman looked at Isabella's dress and commented, "Goodwill or Salvation Army, dear?" "I bet it was Goodwill. It has that characteristic smell." "Actually," Ashley Parker Smith added, "I think I recognize that dress. Didn't my mother donate one just like it last year?" The humiliation Isabella had felt in school returned like a giant wave. She felt her face heat up. Her hands trembled slightly, but she tried to maintain her composure. "I was invited," she said simply, showing the elegant invitation. "Administrative error, obviously," Madison laughed. "Someone confused you with a real person." It was then that Madison had her cruelest idea. She took her champagne flute of Dom Perignon, a bottle that cost $300, and slowly poured it over Isabella's navy blue dress. "Oops," Madison said with false concern. "How clumsy of me. But don't worry, dear. I'm sure Goodwill has other dresses where that one came from." The champagne ran down the dress that Maria had embroidered with such care, staining the fabric and destroying hours of loving work. Isabella stood paralyzed for a moment, feeling all 200 people in the ballroom looking at her. But the worst was yet to come. Courtney Blackwell, laughing hysterically, opened Isabella's little purse and dumped the contents on the floor. Some coins, cheap lipstick, a work ID, and a faded photo of the Rodriguez family. "Look what our princess carries in her purse!" Courtney shouted, kicking the coins across the marble floor. "She doesn't even have money for the bus ride home." The club's security, clearly instructed by Madison, appeared quickly. 2 men in dark suits escorted Isabella through the back doors, as if she were trash being removed. Isabella found herself in the employee parking lot, alone, with the wet dress sticking to her body, no money for a taxi, and a 2-hour bus ride ahead. She cried there, leaning against a cold wall for almost 2 hours. But it was in that dark parking lot, with the dress embroidered by her mother destroyed and her dignity shattered, that Isabella Rodriguez made the promise that would change her life forever. She would return, and when she returned, she would be the one to decide who belonged and who didn't. But why did Isabella hide her fortune for so long? The answer will shock you. Beverly Hills Hotel, Saturday, October 15th, 2024. The legendary Pink Hotel, built in 1912 and frequented by Hollywood stars for a century, rises majestically on Sunset Boulevard. Tonight, the Crystal Ballroom, the same ballroom where Marilyn Monroe celebrated birthdays and where Elizabeth Taylor had 3 of her weddings, hosts the 50-year reunion of Beverly Hills High School, class of 1974. Isabella Rodriguez gets out of a gray Toyota Prius at the hotel entrance at 6:45 p.m. The valet, dressed in an impeccable uniform, looks confused at the modest car among the Lamborghinis, Bentleys, and Tesla Model S that dominate the entrance. Isabella hands him the keys with a gentle smile and a $50 tip. Generous, but not enough to draw attention. She wears a simple black dress from Nordstrom, bought for $200 on sale. Her jewelry is discreet. Small pearl earrings and a white gold necklace that look cheap, but actually cost $15,000 each. A small secret pleasure that no one would ever suspect. Her shoes are comfortable, practical, suitable for a 72-year-old woman who doesn't need to impress anyone. The crystal ballroom is transformed into a glamorous time capsule. Giant photographs of the class of 1974 decorate the walls. 18-year-old boys and girls frozen in their best moments, not imagining how their lives would unfold over the next 5 decades. Round tables are elegantly arranged, each named after a landmark of the era: Watergate table, Nixon table, Vietnam table, Disco era table. At the center of the ballroom, as always, stands Madison Whitmore, now Madison Whitmore Carson, after 3 marriages and 2 lucrative divorces. At 72, she is a testament to what money can buy in terms of physical preservation: facelift, Botox, liposuction, breast implants, and a personal trainer who costs $500 per session. She wears an $8,000 Chanel dress and jewelry totaling more than $200,000. An obscene display of wealth she considers discreet for the occasion. Madison is surrounded by her faithful bodyguards, all fighting against time with the same desperate determination. Stephanie Morrison Williams, now widow of cinema mogul, wears red Valentino and a diamond necklace that belonged to Marilyn Monroe, literally bought at auction for $1, $2 million. Tiffany Goldman Phillips maintains her fame as Beverly Hills' most expensive divorce lawyer, specializing in celebrity separations. She wears Armani and a diamond-studded Rolex. Ashley Parker Smith inherited the family hotel empire and added a luxury spa chain. Her Oscar de la Renta dress was custom-made and cost more than many people earn in a year. Courtney Blackwell, now Courtney Blackwell Montgomery, married a film producer even richer than her father and became a professional philanthropist, spending millions on causes that provide social visibility. When Isabella enters the ballroom, initially no one recognizes her. 50 years have changed everyone dramatically, and Isabella had always been skilled at going unnoticed. She takes a champagne flute from a waiter's tray and positions herself strategically near a marble column where she can observe without being noticed. For 15 minutes, she watches the social dynamics that haven't changed at all since 1974. The same exclusive groups, the same conversations about status and ostentation, the same energy of competition disguised as courtesy. The women subtly compare jewelry, dresses, plastic surgeries, and their children's achievements. The men talk about business, cars, vacation homes, and investments. Darling, did you see how Jennifer Smith is trying to disguise that she had a facelift? It looks horrible, like they stretched a mask over her face. Madison whispers to Stephanie, loud enough for Jennifer across the ballroom to hear. And Michael Thompson, poor thing, Tiffany adds. I heard he lost his Malibu house in the 2008 crisis and never recovered. How embarrassing to be here pretending he still has money. Isabella smiles ironically. She remembers exactly these conversations from adolescence, the same cruel games of social power, just with wrinkles and gray hair. Then it happened. A man approached Isabella, Robert Chen, who had been one of the few kind classmates in school. He recognized her immediately, even after 5 decades. Isabella? Isabella Rodriguez? He asked with a genuine smile. My God, it's been so long. How are you? Their conversation, though discreet, drew attention. Some people turned, curious, and then, like waves on a beach, recognition spread through the ballroom. It's Isabella, someone whispered. The Mexican from our class, another person murmured. I thought she had died or gone back to Mexico, a third voice commented cruelly. Madison, who has hawk ears for anything involving social status, heard Isabella's name and turned slowly, her eyes, tightened by plastic surgery, fixed on the discreet figure near the column. For a moment, Madison wasn't sure. 50 years had changed Isabella dramatically. She was thinner, hair completely white, pulled back in a simple bun, face marked by time but still dignified. But then Madison saw something in Isabella's eyes that immediately transported her back to 1974. That mixture of intelligence and determination that had always bothered her. "I don't believe it," Madison said loud enough for half the ballroom to hear. "Look who had the nerve to show up. Our favorite domestic worker." The ballroom didn't stop completely, but a circle of tension formed. Some people were embarrassed by the cruel comment. Others laughed nervously. Isabella, for her part, didn't lower her eyes as she did in adolescence. She looked directly at Madison and smiled. A calm, confident smile that carried 50 years of secrets. "Hello, Madison," Isabella said simply, her voice firm and clear. "You look exactly as I imagined you would." It was an apparently innocent statement, but loaded with meanings that only Isabella fully understood. The night was just beginning, and Isabella Rodriguez had waited 5 decades for this moment. Dinner was served at 7:30 p.m., grilled salmon with beluga caviar, accompanied by Dom Perignon champagne. Each plate cost more than Isabella earned in a week when she cleaned houses, but she ate calmly, observing the social dynamics unfold around her like an anthropologist studying a primitive tribe. Isabella had been strategically placed at the Vietnam table, clearly a decision by Madison, who arranged the seating to ensure the others stayed together. Along with Isabella were Robert Chen, who had become a respected pediatrician, Maria Santos, no family relation, who became a public school teacher, and some other classmates who weren't part of the school's original elite. During the main course, conversations at other tables revolved around predictable topics: children at Ivy League universities, vacation homes in Europe, yachts in the Mediterranean, and contemporary art investments. Isabella listened to everything with academic interest, mentally noting every detail. It was during dessert, artisanal tiramisu that cost $85 per serving, that Madison decided to begin her show of nostalgic cruelty. "Everyone!" Madison tapped her crystal glass with a silver spoon, drawing attention from the entire ballroom. "How about we play a fun game? Let's relive some memorable moments from our school days." A murmur of excitement ran through the ballroom. People turned in their chairs expecting entertainment. "Remember Isabella Rodriguez?" Madison pointed dramatically toward the corner table. "Our little classmate. What was her nickname again? Oh yes, Izzy the Dizzy." Some people laughed uncomfortably. Others lowered their eyes, clearly embarrassed. But Madison was intoxicated by the power of being the center of attention, and continued, "Isabella, dear, tell everyone, do you still live in that adorable little house in Boyle Heights? You know, I passed by there last month going to a charity event in East LA, and the neighborhood is still authentic." The word authentic was pronounced with a tone that made it clear she meant poor. Isabella smiled calmly and replied, "Yes, Madison, I still live in the same house. I like stability." "How sweet." Stephanie joined the attack. "And your children, dear, did they manage to get decent jobs? I heard you put them in public college. UCLA, wasn't it? Brave choice." The condescending tone was unmistakable. In these women's minds, UCLA was an inferior university compared to the private East Coast schools where they sent their own children. "My children are doing well, thank you," Isabella responded with tranquility. "Sophia has an MBA from Wharton and works at McKinsey. Carlos is an engineer from USC and has his own construction company." There was a moment of silence. Wharton and McKinsey were names that even these socialites respected. But Madison quickly regained control of the narrative. "Oh, how good that they managed to establish themselves," Madison said, implying it was surprising that Isabella's children had achieved anything. "And you, Isabella? Still doing cleaning?" The question was asked with pure malice. Madison knew exactly what Isabella's profession was because she had taken care to investigate before the reunion. She wanted this moment of public humiliation. "I work with properties," Isabella said simply. "Oh, how interesting. Like building superintendent?" Tiffany laughed, making other people at her table laugh too. "Or did you manage to become a realtor? How inspiring." Ashley decided to join the show. "Isabella, dear, you must know some very interesting properties. Like 2-bedroom apartments in East LA, houses with small yards in transitioning neighborhoods." The laughter got louder. Isabella could feel all 200 people in the ballroom looking at her. Exactly like 50 years ago. The same feeling of isolation, the same public humiliation, the same circle of vultures feeding on her dignity. Courtney, not wanting to be left out, added her own venom. "You know, Isabella, I always admired your authenticity. You never tried to be something you're not. Always so real, so humble. Each word was a stab disguised as a compliment. Isabella felt tears wanting to form in the corners of her eyes. The same tears she had shed in the school bathroom 50 years ago. The worst of all was the complicit silence of the others. People who could have defended Isabella, who could have changed the subject, who could have shown a minimum of human decency, simply watched the show as if it were entertainment. Robert Chen, sitting at the same table as Isabella, tried to intervene. Everyone, how about we talk about other things? Oh, Robert. Madison cut him off immediately. Let Isabella speak. She never had a chance to be the center of attention in school. Now it's her opportunity to shine. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and felt 50 years of pain accumulating in her chest. For a terrible instant, she saw herself again as the 18-year-old girl crying in the Beverly Hills country club parking lot, with champagne dripping down the dress her mother had embroidered with so much love. But then, something changed. Isabella opened her eyes, looked directly at Madison, and for the first time that night, smiled for real. Not a polite or embarrassed smile, but the smile of someone who knows something no one else knows. You know, Madison, Isabella said, her voice clear, cutting through the ballroom's silence. You're right. I never had a chance to be the center of attention in school, but maybe it's time to change that. Madison clapped, delighted with the prospect of more entertainment at Isabella's expense. Perfect! How about everyone quickly tells what they've done with their lives? It'll be fun to see how we all evolved. She pronounced evolved, while looking directly at Isabella, making it clear that some people had evolved more than others. I'll start, Madison announced, standing up from her chair like a talk show host. I'm Madison Whitmore Carson, married to Jonathan Carson, CEO of Carson Global Investments. We have houses in Malibu, Aspen, and an apartment in Manhattan. Last year, we donated $500,000 to charities. Tax deductible, of course. She laughed at her own joke. Polite applause echoed through the ballroom. Madison took a theatrical bow and sat down, clearly satisfied with herself. Stephanie stood up next. Stephanie Morrison Williams, widow of dear Harold Williams, who left a legacy in the entertainment industry. I maintain the Williams Foundation, which invests in young artists. My Beverly Hills home was on the cover of Architectural Digest last month. More applause. Ashley followed. Ashley Parker Smith, expanding the family hotel empire. We just opened our 5th luxury resort, this time in the Maldives. And yes, you're all invited. If you can afford it, forced laughter. Tiffany was next. Tiffany Goldman Phillips, specializing in Hollywood's most expensive divorces. I just closed a $50 million deal for an actress you all know very well, but I can't name names. Conspiratorial wink. Courtney closed the first round. Courtney Blackwell Montgomery, president of the Montgomery Charitable Trust. Last year, we organized LA's most exclusive charity ball. We raised $2 million for underprivileged children. It was at our Bel Air home, the one with the infinity pool that appeared in Vogue magazine. Each presentation was more ostentatious than the last. Other classmates followed the same pattern. Doctors with private clinics in Beverly Hills, lawyers from major corporate firms, business people with family businesses, heirs to old fortunes. The circle was closing in on Isabella. The tension in the ballroom was palpable. Everyone expected the embarrassing moment when the poor thing would have to admit her humble life in front of so much success and wealth. Madison couldn't resist one more jab. And now, we saved the best for last. Isabella, dear, tell everyone about your interesting life journey. Isabella stood up slowly. For a moment, she remained silent, looking around the ballroom. 200 people watched her, many with expressions mixing morbid curiosity and condescending superiority. My name is Isabella Rodriguez, she began, her voice clear and firm. I am the owner of Rodriguez Real Estate, Rodriguez Auto Group, and Rodriguez Investment Fund. A low murmur ran through the ballroom. Some people frowned. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Isabella continued, unperturbed. Rodriguez Real Estate currently owns 127 commercial and residential properties in 5 California counties, including 12 buildings in Beverly Hills and 3 commercial towers in downtown LA. The murmur got louder. People began pulling out their cell phones. Rodriguez Auto Group operates 15 dealerships between Los Angeles and San Diego, with annual sales of approximately $120 million. We are the largest certified vehicle seller for working families in Southern California. Now there was absolute silence, only the sound of people typing furiously on their smartphones. And Rodriguez Investment Fund manages a diversified portfolio of $78 million in stocks, bonds, and alternative investments. Madison was pale. Stephanie had stopped looking at her phone and stared fixedly at Isabella. Ashley had her mouth slightly open. Isabella paused, letting the information settle, and then delivered the phrase that would change everything. My current net worth is approximately $100 million. The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if someone had pressed the mute button on the entire ballroom. 200 people simultaneously processing the impossibility of what they had just heard. It was Robert Chen who broke the silence first. Isabella, are you serious? Isabella smiled gently. Completely serious, Robert. Suddenly, dozens of cell phones were being used simultaneously. Google searches, Forbes lists, LinkedIn searches. In seconds, confirmations began to appear. Rodriguez Real Estate, Forbes 2023, richest women in California. Rodriguez Auto Group, largest used car seller in Southern California. Isabella Rodriguez, 72 years old, estimated net worth $110 million. Madison was reading her phone with an expression of absolute shock. Her face, stretched by plastic surgeries, managed to pale even more. But how? Stephanie stammered, completely lost. Isabella, still standing, looked around the ballroom one last time before answering. Very simple. While you spent 50 years showing off money, I spent 50 years making money. The ballroom remained in absolute silence for almost a full minute. The transformation in the room was instantaneous and brutal. In a matter of seconds, Isabella Rodriguez went from being the ignored domestic worker to being the most important person in the room. The change in facial expressions was cinematic. Shock, disbelief, envy, and in many cases, profound shame. Madison Whitmore Carson, who minutes before had controlled the narrative with calculated cruelty, now looked like a lost child. Her fingers trembled as she obsessively scrolled through Google search results as if she could find some evidence that it was all a lie. Rodriguez Real Estate, founded in 2003, largest Latina commercial real estate owner in California. She read aloud, her voice losing all its previous arrogance. Stephanie was reading another article. Forbes, 40 under 40. Wait, this is about her son, Carlos Rodriguez, CEO of CR Construction, following in the business footsteps of his mother, Isabella Rodriguez, real estate mogul. The humiliation was delicious and terrible at the same time. People who had spent the entire evening showing off their achievements now realized they were in the presence of someone who surpassed them in every financial aspect and who had achieved this, starting literally from nothing. Ashley Parker Smith, who had boasted about her 5 resorts, discovered that Isabella owned more real estate properties in LA alone than the entire Parker Smith chain had on the West Coast. Tiffany Goldman Phillips, specialist in millionaire divorces, mentally calculated that Isabella alone was worth more than all her clients combined from the last 5 years. Courtney Blackwell Montgomery, who had raised $2 million at her most exclusive charity ball, realized that Isabella could organize 10 similar events just with the money she had in her personal checking account. But the real change came when people started getting up from their tables and walking toward Isabella. The same ballroom that had witnessed her humiliation 50 years before now witnessed a pathetic social migration. Everyone wanting to be near the new, most powerful person in the room. Isabella, called James Morrison, a former classmate who had never spoken a word to her in school. How incredible. I always knew you were special. Remember when we sat together in math class? Isabella smiled politely. No, James, you never sat with me. Actually, you once changed seats when the teacher tried to pair us as project partners. The embarrassment on James's face was visible, but he kept trying. Ah, what a fantastic memory you have. Listen, I'm on the board of some interesting investments. Maybe we could have lunch next week? The line of people wanting to reconnect with Isabella grew, each one with a more pathetic excuse than the last. Isabella, I always admired your determination. You were always the smartest in the class. What an inspiration you are to all of us. It would be an honor if you met my investment fund. Isabella watched this hypocritical social dance with a mixture of amusement and disgust. 50 years too late, these people finally wanted her friendship, but only because she had become richer than them. Madison, still seated at her table, watched the exodus of people toward Isabella with growing horror. For the first time in her privileged life, she was being abandoned by the very social circle she had controlled for decades. It was then that Isabella did something no one expected. She raised her hand, asking for silence, and walked slowly to Madison's table. The entire ballroom followed her movements, as if she were a queen approaching a fallen subject. Isabella stopped directly in front of Madison, and for a long moment, the two women stared at each other. 50 years of history, pain, humiliation, and now vindication were condensed in that look. "Madison," Isabella said, her voice low but clear enough for the entire ballroom to hear, "you have something to say to me." Madison opened and closed her mouth several times, like a fish out of water. Her elite friends, Stephanie, Tiffany, Ashley, Courtney, all avoided looking directly at her, as if her fall were contagious. I always knew you were special," Madison finally managed to whisper, her voice trembling. Isabella tilted her head slightly. "Interesting, because I remember very clearly you calling me a cleaning lady less than an hour ago, and domestic worker, and suggesting that I didn't belong in this place." The silence in the ballroom was so complete you could hear the air conditioning system running. "Actually," Isabella continued, her voice gaining strength, "I remember you throwing champagne on my dress 50 years ago at the country club party. I remember you dumping my purse on the floor. I remember you making me leave through the back door as if I were trash." Tears began to form in Madison's eyes. Not tears of genuine remorse, but tears of panic from someone who realizes their world has just collapsed. "Isabella, please," she began. "Please what?" Isabella interrupted. "Please forgive 50 years of systematic cruelty. Please pretend that you didn't spend this entire evening trying to humiliate me again, in front of 200 people?" Isabella paused, looking around the ballroom, and then said the words that would resonate forever in Madison's mind. "You taught me a valuable lesson 50 years ago, Madison. You taught me that I should never depend on your approval to be happy. You taught me that true power isn't displayed. It's built in silence. You taught me that the best revenge isn't lowering myself to your level. It's rising so high that you become irrelevant." Madison tried to stand up, perhaps to approach Isabella, perhaps to flee, but her legs wouldn't obey. She remained seated, small and diminished, while Isabella continued. "You spent 50 years spending your parents' money, your husband's money, your inheritance money. I spent 50 years building my own fortune, brick by brick, property by property, smart decision by smart decision." Isabella leaned slightly toward Madison. "And you know what the difference between us is, Madison? You were born rich and will die rich. I was born poor and became rich. You inherited your status. I built mine. You need to display your wealth to feel important. I can afford to be humble because my wealth speaks for itself." The final blow came when Isabella smiled, not a cruel or vindictive smile, but a smile of genuine pity. "Madison, you're right about one thing you said tonight. I was always special. The difference is that now I know it, and I don't need your approval, or anyone else's approval in this room, to validate who I am." Isabella turned to leave, but stopped and looked one last time at Madison. "Oh, and Madison, thank you. Without your cruelty, I might never have found the motivation to become who I became. In a way, you were the best teacher I ever had." Isabella Rodriguez walked toward the exit of the crystal ballroom, with a dignity that transformed her departure into a statement of absolute victory. Each step she took on the Italian marble floor echoed like a final sentence being pronounced. 200 people watched her in reverential silence, as if they were witnessing a historic moment. At the ballroom door, Isabella stopped and turned one last time. Her gaze swept over the embarrassed faces, the cell phone still displaying articles about her fortune, the expressions of shock and poorly disguised envy. She waved politely, a farewell gesture that carried the implicit message that she would never need to see those people again. The valet brought her Toyota Prius with the same professional efficiency, but now, with noticeably different respect. The $50 tip that had seemed generous at the beginning of the evening now seemed modestly appropriate coming from someone who could have given $1,000 without blinking. As Isabella drove down Sunset Boulevard toward Boyle Heights, she didn't feel euphoria or malicious satisfaction. Instead, she felt something much more valuable: closure. 50 years of wounds had finally healed, not through destructive revenge, but through irrefutable proof that she had completely transcended the limitations they had tried to impose on her. On Monday morning, October 18, 2024, Los Angeles woke up to news that shook the city's business circles. Rodriguez Investment Fund had acquired 60% of Carson Global Investment shares for $47 million. Jonathan Carson, Madison's husband, had been secretly in financial trouble for 2 years. Bad investment decisions, imprudent loans, and an unsustainably expensive lifestyle had put his company on the brink of bankruptcy. Isabella's offer came as financial salvation, but also as the cruelest irony Madison could imagine. Madison called Isabella on Tuesday morning at 6:30 a.m. Her voice was hoarse from crying. "Isabella, please, we need to talk. Jonathan can't be fired. He's 67 years old. No one else will hire him." Isabella, sitting in her simple kitchen in Boyle Heights, drinking coffee from a cheap ceramic mug, listened patiently to Madison's desperate pleas. When she finished speaking, Isabella responded calmly, "Madison, I don't fire people for personal revenge. I've never done that in 50 years of business. But I also don't keep executives out of pity. Jonathan will continue as CEO as long as the company is profitable and he demonstrates competence. If he fails in either of these aspects, he will be replaced by someone more capable." "But Isabella," Madison pleaded, "we were school classmates. Doesn't that mean anything?" Isabella's response was precise and devastating. "You're right, Madison. Our school history means a lot. It taught me that character is more important than birthright, that hard work is worth more than inheritance, and that dignity cannot be bought. Jonathan will be evaluated by the same criteria I use for all my investments: results, integrity, and competence. If he possesses these qualities, he will prosper. If he doesn't, he will fail." 3 months later, in January 2025, Isabella received a handwritten letter. The envelope was expensive, the paper was high quality, but the handwriting was shaky, hands that were no longer as steady as before. "Dear Isabella, I don't know where to begin this letter. For 50 years, I lived with the arrogance of someone who never questioned their own worth. I thought being born into a wealthy family gave me the right to look at other people as inferior. I thought my social status made me superior. I was wrong, terribly, cruelly wrong. You showed me at the reunion what I had never understood, that a person's true value isn't in how much they inherited, but in how much they built. It's not in how many people envy them, but in how many people they helped. It's not in how much they spend, but in how much they produce. I spent my entire life being small, petty, and cruel, while you grew, built, and became a true force in the world. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I finally understood who was always the truly special person between the two of us. With deep regret and belated respect, Madison." Isabella read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer of her desk. The same simple wooden desk where she had studied accounting and investments on cold nights in Boyle Heights decades ago. She didn't respond to the letter immediately, not out of cruelty, but because she needed to process what those words meant to her. A week later, Isabella wrote a brief response. "Madison, I accept your regret. More importantly, I hope you use this experience to treat other people with more kindness in the future. The past cannot be changed, but we still have time to choose who we want to be from here on. With cordiality, Isabella's." 6 months later, Isabella learned through mutual acquaintances that Madison had begun working as a volunteer at a public school in East LA, teaching life skills to students from working families. She never spoke about her volunteer work on her social media or at social events. Apparently, she had finally learned the value of genuine humility. In December 2024, Isabella made an anonymous donation of $2 million for a scholarship fund for low-income Latino students who wanted to study business and entrepreneurship. The scholarship name, Miguel Santos Rodriguez Fund, in honor of the husband who always believed in her dreams. Isabella Rodriguez never publicly boasted about her wealth. She continued living in the same simple house, driving modest cars, wearing practical clothes. But now, when she walked through the streets of Boyle Heights, she walked with the tranquility of someone who had proven to herself and to the world that birth circumstances don't determine the value of a life. Isabella's true victory wasn't becoming richer than her tormentors. It was discovering that she had always been stronger, smarter, and more worthy than them. Wealth just made it impossible to ignore, and sometimes, at night, when she looked out her kitchen window at the lights of Los Angeles stretching to the horizon. Isabella smiled, remembering the words Madison had shouted 50 years ago. "You'll never amount to anything in life." How wrong she had been. This is proof that true power doesn't come from the cradle where we're born, but from the determination with which we build our own path. Isabella Rodriguez transformed every tear shed into fuel for her success, every humiliation into motivation to grow, and every no into a reason to prove them wrong. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful that they become irrelevant. The end of this moving story.